All right, it is 2:30 and I think we will get started. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our session, Teaching Educational Concepts of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Environmental Justice, with our presenter, Shendell, from Rutgers University. So just a few reminders to keep yourself on mute unless we open up a discussion. I'll be monitoring the chat, so we can do all that. My name is Kelly Wenzel. If you weren't on the in the opening last night, I am the president of ANJEE. We're excited to have you here today for this workshop at our 38th annual winter conference. Special thank you to our conference sponsors, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, our anonymous donor who's a friend of science and environmental education in New Jersey, the Institute for Natural History Arts. We'd also like to thank our keynote sponsor, Nigerian Associates, our award sponsor, Duke Farms, and BASF for supporting our field experiences. We will be placing a link to our YouTube channel in the chat room in a few minutes, where you can see all of our recorded content from past conferences, forums, and other sponsored events. And we hope you subscribe to our channel. This conference will also be on that channel in a few weeks. So Dr. Shendell from Rutgers University is our presenter, as I stated before. During this session, you will learn about how New Jersey Safe Schools program in the Rutgers School of Public Health led to the development of new online course for secondary school students on climate change, environmental justice, and sustainability. We'll outline this available asynchronous online course and share results of a 20-question survey on student knowledge, attitudes, and awareness as indicators of immediate impact. So, Derek, you can go ahead, introduce yourself, and get started.
All right, Kelly, thank you so much. So I just want to do a sound check again, because I'm trying to adjust the volume so that you all can hear me and I'm not speaking too loudly because I'm using a headset today. So just let me know in the chat if you cannot hear me. Otherwise, we'll assume we're good to go. And if you see me turn my head at times, because I have multiple monitors, I'm going to also try to monitor the chat with Kelly's assistance. So otherwise, I will be looking straight at you through the camera and sharing both a PowerPoint and various open tabs of a browser to demo some things with you today so that you know what you and your students could have available for free. Anything I share today, thanks to grant support that we have from the state and federal departments of ed, and for some of our other work, smaller agency grants or some foundations. But everything I'm showing today is definitely sponsored predominantly by the state and federal departments of ed. So I'm going to share a screen and you will see a PowerPoint. I'm going to go between a PowerPoint, not in show mode, but I want to be able to go to a browser screen. So just to see what I'm going to do, I'm going to be able to demo some of what I'm showing you, and also a few other opportunities related to this topic from the state. So just wanted to first acknowledge the fact that this is a team at the Rutgers School of Public Health in our Safe Schools program. So as Kelly mentioned, I'm faculty here, so I have different hats, which is typical of people at Rutgers. I also lead our environmental health science concentration, and I'm a member of ANJEE as an individual. So I've been attending these things in the past. I'm happy to contribute as a presenter this year. And then I want to acknowledge in particular 3 graduate students, all of whom got their MPHs with us in environmental health science. One of whom has not graduated yet. She's doing her practicum with me as well in New Jersey Work Environment Council, but they are all co-authors on one or more of the papers that this relates to, and also the full-time staff at our program listed below who contributed to everything we do, but in particular the development of this course. So just if you didn't know who we were, because most of what we do does relate to safety, health, and wellness of youth and young workers in the state. And we do take the historical approach that we work directly most of the time with agencies, teachers, and administrators. But more recently, for a variety of reasons, including the aftermath of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, we also offer some things directly to adolescents and young adults ages 14 to 21. And I'm sure most, if not all of you, are familiar. In the state of New Jersey, services are provided to people in this age group. And then afterwards, there's even a transition to post-secondary services offered by other agencies, depending on individual education plans and other things for career and technical ed called student training plans. So here I just want to acknowledge our main website, or I should say our vanity page for our website. We're also available through the school. And then the agency alliance we have, which makes everything we do possible and makes sure that the information we use is the most up-to-date and the most reliable from state and federal sources. We tend not to go to international sources unless it was something very specific regarding child labor in the past. So just a brief introduction and content. This is not news to anyone here, but I'm giving a similar presentation to the environmental health professionals, both state and national, later this winter, spring. So tried to create one slide that kind of encapsulates everything. So we know about the leadership of the Office of the Governor and First Lady Tammy Murphy, and we know how things are being implemented this school year. At the same time, we heard earlier in this conference that some of the student learning standards are still being written or modified and updated. And in addition, prior to this school year, in general, educational professionals were receiving limited formal guidance and limited examples how to teach climate change and environmental justice. And even now in the graduate school, we now have an elective course on environmental justice. We are going to have an elective course on climate change. But prior to that, it was my role and the role of a colleague to include at least one class session out of a semester in our core class for all master's students on these topics. So even in higher ed, there's a move toward having specialized classes in these areas. On top of all that, in recent years, we've had the aftermath of the pandemic. And one of the things we learned from our needs assessment in fall of 2020 is there needs to be some combination of in-person and online or a hybrid format. And what I'm going to show you today was our opportunity to create something as an introductory course that would only hopefully assist teachers who have to do many other things in the classroom or potentially give for homework and assignments online or in some hybrid format. In addition, because of our focus about career and technical ed, we did want to focus on the high school level, and we did want to focus on students that are going to be potentially taking work-based learning positions in certain industries that have either very clear direct or potentially indirect connections with climate change in terms of energy production or engineering or other STEM areas. So this slide I'm going to only put up briefly. It's simply a list of the papers that everything I'm presenting today are based on. There's the needs assessment, which got into a journal because people have been looking to New Jersey for obvious reasons. We do historically have the #1 public education system in the country, or we rank 2 behind Massachusetts, who also does a lot of work on safety and health in the environment. And then there are the 2 papers behind developing this course, and the one just accepted at the end of this holiday weekend, which is essentially including the data, some of which I'm going to present to you today. So I can provide these reprints at no cost to anybody by email. And once they're in actual issues of journals like the second one, these will be open access. The one on COVID is automatically open access because of COVID. These journals have decided to make them open access as well. So the course was developed over the prior school year. So because of that 1 year delay, we'll call it, in the implementation of the standards, we built into our grant for the Maine New Jersey Safe Schools program to really run a comprehensive process to develop and then pilot it, versus some of what we've had to do, like I'm sure most of you could appreciate, we got literally 2 months, maybe 3 months in spring of 2020 to figure out how to go from in-person to online. So what we did is we created stages. Now, the goal of this was to be high school teachers and administrators in career and technical vocational education who supervise students and other staff so that they could eventually sign up their students for this. So in order to get to that point, we first wanted to do an internal test and then a beta test. And the internal test was mainly to know that we are getting the best possible content from federal and state agencies, and in some cases, international organizations like the UN Environment Program, the UN Development Program, the World Health Organization, and different subsections of WHO. Once we did our small internal tests, and this will make more sense when I demo things in Canvas, we wanted to actually see at Rutgers among first-year students who were fresh out of high school, but had a lot of their later years, or I should say year or years in high school impacted by COVID-19. So we asked for volunteers. Lily was in a combined degree program, bachelor's and master's, and was on the swim team. So we did voluntarily ask some of the environmental science majors and swim and diving team members to do this. I asked my entire group of burn seminar first-year students from my indoor air quality class, and we got a certain group of them to be our beta testers. Moving forward from that, once we ironed out any kinks, we then did a statewide pilot. And so essentially what I did is I went to meetings. At this point, they were virtual, for what are known as the New Jersey Cooperative Ed Association and the New Jersey Cooperative Ed Coordinators Association, which represent South Central Jersey and Central North Jersey, respectively. And I asked teachers if they would volunteer their groups of students. And then in addition, Lily and Yvette and Cafe went back to their high school alma mater, which were in either New Jersey or that greater Philadelphia area. And we were able to get one of them to participate as well. So in the end, we were able to get one or two in each region. Unfortunately, one had to defer to later in the year and they were not part of the pilot. So we ended up having one in Central Jersey and two in South. And that met the requirement for at least having 3 school districts and groups of students. When these students finished, just so you know, they got a certificate of completion that my staff and I signed. The teachers who previewed these courses got professional development, and of course, 2 professional development units is not a lot compared to some of the other things we do, but it was something they could use toward the 5-year requirement of having 100 or more. So this was an online asynchronous course. So I'm going to jump from here in a second to Canvas. So we created this in modules. And when I'll go to Canvas, you'll know exactly what we mean by a module. So the idea was, even if this was available online asynchronously, meaning you could work at your own pace whenever you want, 24/7, assuming the teachers and students were invited as guests to the Rutgers Canvas with their their school-based student email, that they could do this all at once. They could do it, module by module. They could do 2 modules in a class period and then come back to it. We left that up to the teachers to decide with their students. Most people did this in the course of a week in a couple different class periods or the course of the week, but some teachers that had double periods may have elected to have them try to do the whole thing in one sitting, or maybe a double period plus a follow-up class later in the week. They also did a basic course evaluation, which we have for all our classes. It's essentially required by what we do from the Department of Ed to see, how people like any of the individual educational trainings. But we also had a modified SCA survey. So this stands for Student Conservation Association. They had a survey a couple years ago at this point nationally of all their interns and other students in programs. And they had some interesting findings for a very similar age group, approximately 18 to 24. So in order to compare our pilot test students with some other sample, we used an excerpt of the survey that was 20 questions, something that could be shorter. And we then were able to see for this group what they thought after a training versus what those students thought after a summer experience working with Student Conservation Association. So although I'm going to click one slide forward, I'm just going to quickly go into Canvas here. So Kelly, just please let me know if you don't see my Rutgers Canvas screen. So from the home page, you would click on the course, as you can see from the very short title. And essentially, each module can open up by just clicking the button. So I've had them all open on purpose here. So we go from environmental science to climate change to natural disasters and extreme weather events. And you'll notice already, you have to finish one section before you go to the next. So for a student, in their view, they would start with the first, then they would go to the second, then they would go to the third. Only in the teacher view that you see here can I kind of scroll at will back and forth. Then it goes sustainability, environmental justice concepts, and then finally the simple reflection, which is kind of part of the evaluation where it simply asks them to complete these questions. They don't get graded for their content. It's more about completing them. There's the multiple choice standard evaluation questions. And then only for the pilot, we did that survey with an excerpt from the Student Conservation Association. The other thing we've done as at the end of the course, the students and teachers could always go back and see the entire list of references and resources used throughout the course. So for example, let's say I just opened this up in another tab and to show you. In essentially, just waiting for alphabetical order, like you were looking at a reference list to a book chapter or a paper or some document or white paper at an agency. We've provided the whole list and whenever possible, a link to the online free version of the article or the resources. So you have things from the U.S. Geologic Survey, or a portion of that, I should say, things from either state or federal OSHA, from the United Nations, some other universities that have done things on specific topics like environmental justice, such as Yale, but anything here that we could provide free access to online, we've done so. In addition, just going back a screen, our Climate Institute, which is really a collaboration of many schools across Rutgers. I'm an affiliated faculty member as well. It's pretty much roughly 100 or so faculty and then various staff that have done things, but a few people worked with Dr. Marjorie Kaplan to create a really nice set of videos and different other types of broadcasts that are anywhere from 5 to 15, 60 minutes in length. I use some of them in my class for the graduate students, but we wanted to have people get easy access to this. Each of these is either directly visible on this page itself, or it opens up to, say, a YouTube. So whether it's on a browser or you have the YouTube app on your phone or your tablet, you have options for how you want to view these. Personally, I like to use this one, what's called Climate Change in the Jersey Shore. I also like the one farther above it, Populations Vulnerable to Climate Change. And then if you want to see one of the earlier ones where my colleague, the now retired Dr. George D. Fernando, speaks about climate impacts in New Jersey from a medical professional and MPH trained physician scientist, this was an interview that he did for the Climate Institute. But there's so many other topics that you may find interesting for your local community or region within New Jersey, that there's really something for everyone. And I'm a big proponent of having both written, oral, visual, and discussion type exercises. So even within our course, which again, any teacher can preview, there's not just pages people read, there's some embedded videos, there are some embedded exercises people can try, some simple calculations. There's various different things that we've built in here. But again, all of them are available right at the bottom, either the references or the videos that we embedded from the Climate Institute, plus many others. So I will go back to some other things later on, but for now, I'm going to go back into the MEN presentation. So this slide here, just as a figure or box, essentially is the rough outline for every single module in the course. So we did try to have a very standard format, whether it was climate change, sustainability, going all the way down to environmental justice. So it's a very, it was a way for us to make sure that each of the modules were roughly the same in length, although it may take students a little longer to go through one than the other, depending on how they wanted to explore the resources within those modules, especially if there was a calculator or tool outside of Rutgers that we linked to. I just showed you this in a more live format, but you never know about internet, especially when you're going to meetings. So I also just put this on one slide for you just to see one more time, that this is a what we call a cached image of, if I was going to print it to a PDF as much as possible, just to give you a sense of the outline of the course again, that it's very similar. One thing I did want to point out, because we are the Safe Schools program, it was important to us to emphasize not just what gets relatively more media attention, but also what gets less. And for workers, it's just as relevant. So in New Jersey, even though it's been a fairly mild winter so far, statewide, there is still the concern about cold stress, and in addition to heat stress. And then in addition, we want people to learn about how heat-related illness and heat stress is not just a summertime thing, even if the agencies we work with emphasize heat-related illness and heat stress all the way up to heat stroke from about Memorial Day to Labor Day. It can occur at any time, depending on the type of microenvironment young people or even older adults work in. So in this one module, we separated out heat and cold stress and even some standards or guidelines that exist to give some more information at an introductory level to the students, especially because we're targeting, again, high school students, career and technical ed or STEM subject areas, so that they're aware that year-round there could be issues during extreme weather events. It's not just the classic summertime or end of summer hurricane season. That being said, we don't go into great detail about earthquakes and some other things that are maybe more common in other parts of the country, but we do note that these things also can occur in New Jersey and in our region. Okay, so now a little bit about that survey, which was a way, in addition to help the graduate students have something concrete to analyze, in addition to helping build the course and have the course evaluation. So in order to get 3 students through with what we call practicum capstone, it was a way to have more data that among the 3 of them, they could work with me and get some experience with data management and analysis. So we're always looking for ways to help students through our program, especially if they're contributing to the greater good, while they're also working part-time in this case with the history and also taking their final classes. So the way we ran this survey is, and this is just the reference to the report about it, is the goal was to have the students complete it. There is no best answer in some cases. It might ask for your opinion, or it might ask for you to do a relative rank. So we decided to code the pilot just to have a score of 1 if it was a good answer or the best answer. But if it was from options selected where there was no technical wrong answer or opinions mattered, we gave a partial score simply to allow the student to progress and to ensure, no matter what, that a student was going to, quote unquote, pass this part of the course. The last thing we wanted was for a student to, quote unquote, have a failing grade for this survey simply by finishing and expressing their opinions. That was not our goal. Our goal is to complete this as part of the 3-part end of course activity. So this is how we scored it in Canvas to make sure that there were no issues. I know this is going to be hard to read, but in the paper that's now published, we actually give the list of questions, and therefore it's a little bigger. But to get it on one slide, I just tried to compress here the list. Each of these had simple answer options that they would choose from, or that they could rank on a Likert scale with either a drop-down menu or, again, just little buttons that they would basically click on. 5 of the questions I parsed out to show you the answers regarding what they believe about different types of environmental pollution that have either direct or indirect relationships with climate change. There were 3 specific questions that were about environmental justice and a few others that were indirectly related to environmental justice in terms of their perceptions of how it's covered. Everything else was about climate change, natural disasters, and extreme weather events. So just to give you a sense of the overall sample of how many people helped us design and prove this course could work later on statewide. So very simply, the top button is just to show we had 2 internal testers who are basically federal work study students with me early in their MPH program. And then we had the volunteer group of undergraduates from the different sources I told you about before. That was what we called our Rutgers beta test group. The main focus here is the pilot test with the statewide sample of 3 schools and districts. We had essentially, and I'm allowed to name them just here, and then everywhere else they're given acronyms. We had, Cinnaminson School District High School. That was Lily's alma mater. So shout out to their science teachers for helping out. Here we have Somerset County. So again, shout out to all their different STEM teachers and even some social sciences teachers who have the same students were on board. And then we had my colleague Mark Drummond at West Deptford High School, who their school has been instrumental in some of our other projects, including our concussion study for Kessler Foundation. So Mark runs several classes in their career and technical ed, and he was able to collaborate with his colleagues to get both STEM and non-STEM students involved. So as you can see here, these numbers add up pretty quickly to well over 100. So we met our goal of getting over 100. And then many of them finished within the time period, which was essentially at the end of their winter break until the very first weekend in April. So we wanted this wrapped up before Good Friday and Easter weekend, and therefore the school spring breaks. So results from just looking at the knowledge checks combined. So each module had a knowledge check, which is what the Canvas term is, but essentially it's an assignment or activity that they do at the end of each module. For DOE approval, because again, this was part of our regular program, we need to meet a goal for all of our courses, whether it's students or teachers, of 70% or better on average across each of the assignments or activities. And as you can see here, with just one district having a fairly wide standard deviation, but still every student passed, and one would argue that most of the students did quite well across all the modules. We go into more detail about why there may have been more variability in one district versus another for the paper, but for these purposes, this was the summary we want to show for a presentation. When we break it out to look at the knowledge checks individually, it gives you a little more insight into how maybe one knowledge check was relatively more difficult for a certain group of students than others, but these are still comparable scores. And again, if the goal was to be passing, you can see that passing in this case would have been anything above a 3.0 to 3.5 and higher. So as you can see, everyone passed, and sometimes you have deviations that overlap that, but that's because of the relatively small sample within each district. We did confirm that every student passed each knowledge check, and some of them aced all of them, and some of them were a little lower, but every single person did pass to progress through the course. And so looking at the overall scores, we were confident that at least for an introductory short course just on concepts, that this could provide value to the state, because we know that teachers are going to be doing many other things to meet the requirements of student learning standards across all the subject areas. So a couple other things that we learned, and now this is here coming from some of those other things like the course evaluation, the course reflection, and eventually the Conservation Association survey. So I'm going to show you these in essentially a succession. So from the reflection activity, you can see 95% believe climate change is real. And among those who did finish knowledge check 3 and then did the reflection, 97% were aware of heat stress and 98% were aware of cold stress. So for a few students, this was, brand new information in both cases, but most of them, to my surprise, to be honest, were aware almost equally of both. I really personally thought we would see more students aware of heat stress compared to cold stress, but we were proven wrong by these initial data. Just to give you a sense of this is a tabular, I want to give Cafe credit. So this table was in Cafe's master's report. We ended up for the paper being asked by the reviewers to just simply have a text paragraph because they felt that we could just get the same message across without having a table. And so sometimes you have to do what the reviewers want in this process. So each of these rows became a sentence on its own in the paper versus just a simple table. But we asked them about cold stress, heat stress, about the role of drinking water, about the relationship between climate change and extreme weather. And essentially, overall, they all did really well. There was a very small group of students that may have not been as informed as we thought they might be about climate change and extreme weather events. However, the overwhelming majority got this answer correct within this knowledge check. Now for the student conservation survey. So I only selected a couple questions that Lily, Cafe, Yvette, and I wanted to highlight for these different audiences, although again, everything is in the paper. So in this survey, we saw a very similar number. I told you it was 95% when they did the reflection activity. Well, based on just the wording of this question with the word believe, it was 93.4%. 4 said no, and 1 was unsure. So again, I think it's a comparable outcome, whether it's the simple reflection activity or the question that another couple thousand young people answered nationwide for Student Conservation Association. This one, pretty consistent, 96% believe human activity is the leading cause of climate change. 1 answered no, and 2, interestingly enough, because we allowed it, chose human and natural causes being co-leading, which again is not wrong, depends on your information at the time and how you view things and where you live. So if you take these 2 into account, the overwhelming majority, all but 1, understand that humans and our activities do contribute substantially, if not, we are the leading cause of climate change. There were a few other questions related to climate change, and I've just tried to highlight here. Most believe climate change will impact their lives more over the next 5 years. So we're talking about 2022, 23 through essentially 2027 than during the first school year of the now ongoing COVID pandemic. So that was interesting to us, so that even with the severity of the pandemic on our society, they still believe climate change is going to have more of an impact. And then again, almost 60%, but nearly 3 in 5 stated their belief that there is still time to prevent the worst effects. And then roughly almost 1 out of 7 or almost 14% believe it's too late. So the way we took this is that there is definitely hope in that educating young people will help lead to their own behavior changes, which we know from other areas of public health, individual and community level changes can really have an impact on improving the public's health, regardless of the topic area. EJs, or environmental justice. So most students believe or are familiar with the idea of environmental justice. 2 out of 3 viewed it as part of conserving our environment, but also a simple majority, or about 5 and 9, noted that we could improve our characterization of EJ. So on a personal note, I just want to comment here. There's been an increased emphasis in the current administration, including predominantly the US EPA with its own strategic plan, about trying to make positive change about not only improving characterization, but getting more grant money out there, getting more attention to EJ throughout the agency. So while the students answered this prior to a lot of these new initiatives, some things are already happening that hopefully if we were to ask this again in the future, we'd see that more students would think that the US has improved its characterization, and therefore fewer of them would say that we could improve. Because I think personally that there have been improvements made in the recent months, but of course, more can always be done. And in some parts of the country, there's a lot more work that needs to be done. Interestingly, and Lily, all of us are still a little baffled by question 19. So as you can see here, based on the wording of the question, is environmental justice a part of conserving our environment or a separate issue? More said no than yes. And that was a little bit different than what we would thought. And we don't have an exact answer or ability to understand exactly what they were all thinking. But we do think it's important to point this out because it was a little different from the opposite balance that the Student Conservation Association sought with students that had a longer experience working with them for their summer projects. For the questions that related to environmental pollution, and in the paper, we were asked by the reviewers to bring these out and highlight them just in the text instead of being part of a table. So we've done that here today. 4 out of 5 or more identified 4 of the 5 problems as major problems with respect to climate change directly. So I've listed them here for you with the percents. The number 1 out of the 4 was deforestation. The idea that you are taking down a sink of carbon dioxide. And of course, especially if you burn some of those trees and the various branches and leaves, you are releasing directly not just carbon dioxide, but also other ambient air pollutants, and you're also affecting probably more negatively than not the different nutrient cycles in those forested areas. Only noise pollution was viewed as more of a minor problem than a major problem, but there's still a fair number of students that saw this also as a major problem. And so why would noise be potentially a major problem with respect to climate change? What we hope they learned from the module was that if you have sources of energy, coal-fired power plants, diesel trucks, different types of vehicles, which clearly make noise, especially on road, but also off-road. There's different industries, what we call in environmental science, point, area, and mobile sources, that they should have recognized, even things that are in the air like aircraft, that noise pollution is also being created at the same time as other pollutants, including carbon dioxide. But some of them, as you can see, or the majority, viewed that as a more minor problem. But at least we got them to think about it, and some of them recognized it as a major problem. So in summary, before I go back online and show you some other resources that we introduced them to or that were connected to this course, we felt that we found few statistically significant differences in some of those results I just showed you between the regions, between, at least the identities identified here where we had enough sample size, which was male versus female, and also by looking at STEM versus non-STEM career clusters just for the pilot tests, we saw consistent results, which is what we were hoping for. Sometimes when you don't see significant or statistical differences, that's a good thing. In this case, we felt it was. And we know this is just an introductory course, but our goal was to better equip high school students who are entering the workforce for the first time, sometimes just for seasonal jobs, sometimes as part of work-based learning, and be better prepared for their own careers, whether that includes some kind of post-secondary education or not. I want to show you some of those resources, besides the fact that we did not make any changes to the knowledge checks. We did turn off the Conservation Association survey because we felt that that could be coded a little easier outside of Canvas and was maybe a one-time opportunity, since now the standards are going to be in place. When we asked the survey again, the standards were not in place, and the only way students would have had prior information was from their own life experiences, their own teachers' efforts in the classrooms prior to the standards, or maybe other family and community experiences they had. So we want to just emphasize again some of the other resources, because what we found, it was that it was really important to have credible resources. So I'm just going to quickly open up something else again, why we emphasize that. So many things that we referred to in creating this course and justifying it to the Department of Ed as a core part of what otherwise is a safety and health program focused on more child labor laws, hazardous occupations orders, various other topics, not climate change. There was the brief, I'll put it, that was about STEM teaching and climate change that came out from a researcher named Dr. Veronica McGowan out of, I believe this is, I think it was the West Coast, but she was funded by NSF. And it talks about how in a few cases that people are entitled to develop scientific understanding of climate change. It's an interdisciplinary topic, attention to equity, and therefore including some issues about environmental justice. So that was one reference that caught our eye. There's the report by my colleague, Dr. Lauren Madden, and others at TCNJ, John Henry, who's now retired at school boards, had a role in this. When you look at just their 6 goals about climate change needs as a white paper developed for the state, I've highlighted a couple of things here. You want to be able to give from global down to local perspectives, which is exactly what we highlight in public health as well. You want to be able to educate all members of the communities. So we had to develop something that teachers could preview, but that would also serve other administrators supervising students as well as the students themselves. And that this was just, we understand, an introductory small piece of what teachers are going to do throughout the curriculum. But it's emphasized here that you have to have multiple entry points to allow schools and teachers to decide what's best for them. we just wanted to have something concrete that the career and tech ed teachers could start with, since as I'm about to show you, there wasn't as much for at this point into their student learning standards. So just to jump to a document from the Department of Ed about student learning standards, this is the 2-page section about career readiness, life literacies, and key practices. And while I highlighted several things that we need to make sure are covered by all our courses, there was just literally one short paragraph about climate change, and then 2 examples for middle school and high school about how this could work. So we went back and we kind of said, okay, let's look at the different practices that are noted. And it goes into things about, technology to enhance productivity, working in teams, developing cultural and global competence, using critical thinking skills, consider environmental, social, and economic impacts, attend to financial well-being. So we tried in the course to acknowledge the fact that environmental economics are part of the decision-making of agencies. And we gave them some resources and some online tools where you might have to consider both the energy and economic as well as the environmental components. And then finally, this is probably the most comprehensive position statement we saw from the National Science Teachers Association. And it really, in my opinion, reiterated how you had to have evidence-based science as part of these trainings, different strategies, not just for avoiding it, but mitigating climate change, this idea of mitigation to adaptation, and then also highlight where there are data sets or other database tools available. So I realize I'm just glossing over some things from these resources, but they've been out there for several years now. And I just wanted to give you a sense of what we lean to frame what ended up being just a 2-hour introductory course. So into here, I also want to point out a couple of other things. I'm sure all of you are aware, there's just waiting for my browser to refresh. I apologize for a moment. This is the climate change education page. I know you're all familiar with this. There's several different things here, including that report. So the report I just mentioned by Lauren Madden and the group that were tasked to do it at TCNJ. If you're interested, that's the direct link to it. There's another page regarding student learning standards. I just wanted to, I had already pushed this down. I had wanted to open up just the grades 9 to 12 again. You got to go all the way to the bottom until you see something about career and technical ed. And this is a little bit more than what we had when we first designed the course. But even here, I wanted to highlight a couple of things that have not changed. Contribution of individuals with different points of view and experience, which is really why it was important to us to find some kind of survey to ask these students during the pilot test that would allow for differences of opinions, but still gauge the immediate initial impact of learning some of this information, or at least learning a little bit more about things they had familiarity with. Information needs to be shared accurately and ethically, and accurate information may help in making valuable and ethical choices. So this is why it was so important to us to make sure we not only used reputable resources during the course, that we provided access to them in a one-stop shop page at the end, like I showed you, as well as that suite of videos from the Climate Institute, which each of them are based on reputable information, including research by all of us here at Rutgers and our partner institutions around the country, and in some cases around the world. And then finally, what I'm going to finish up the presentation before questions is we have been listed at the Climate Education Hub. It changes every day where we are on the first page, but we're within the first 15. So thanks to Subject of Climate and Margaret and her team for working with us and the Ed Commission and getting some of our resources up there. So I'm going to give you the contact information in the slide, but we've been available for people to preview since the summer. And we knew that starting the second half of this year is when most of the attention would go to this, because you have so many other things to deal with at the beginning of the year. And as a fellow teacher, even though I'm in higher ed, I can appreciate that as well. So just to wrap up with a couple of contact slides, this is just to put in text what I just showed you. You can contact us directly. You can look at the short description in the Subject of Climate Change Education Hub. In other words, this has all been approved by the DOE and these other agencies to be listed there. If you want any of those reprints to see more in detail about this course and the survey results, happy to give them to you. If you sign up for our newsletter, that would point you to this page within each newsletter. I'll show you what this looks like in a moment because it highlights climate change in the upper left, first listed out of 12. I just showed you that page here. So just to go back to my browser for one moment. In our newsletter, you would just click on any of these, but essentially I clicked on one just to show you. In the resources and opportunities, it talks about not only things available statewide, like the climate challenge and that education hub, but we have our course. And so in our course page, which is here, you would click on just the first one, which is our topical trainings, and that would bring you to this page. And then from there, you would just get another short description and contact us. So I will finish by just saying my computer base, thank you for your attention. I've left approximately 15 minutes for questions or comments. This is our contact information. This is the main team email that would be best to get access to the course as a guest yourselves. And if you already know you have students that want to do this at no cost, we simply would need their first name, their last name, and a school district recognized email. Now, for most districts, you provide them email accounts. If as a teacher, you are authorized to use a personal account for a student, Rutgers will allow us to do that, but we would need that in writing. In other words, you're providing us with your list of students and their emails, which recognizes that's the one you use yourself. We find in most cases for all of our classes, the teachers have school district assigned emails. They may have a personal email for themselves that they want to use as backup for their students. It tends to be a school district assigned email. So Kelly, I'm going to leave this on here, but be happy to take any questions, or if you'd like me to stop sharing screen, we can put that email in the chat box as well.
I think we can continue sharing for a minute. So we did have one question in the chat related to access to the course in Canvas. So if a teacher wanted access to that course, would they sign up through the website where you were before?
So the website just provides the information. You would contact us at our team account here. The one I'll just I'm trying to highlight it quickly. That one. So this is our team email account. We get requests from teachers all the time for our various courses. So you would email us and request that you get access to any of those courses on the free trainings page. If you want to preview them or take them yourself for the few professional development and then make a decision. We have teachers all over the state that preview, and then they decide for themselves, do they want to do this with a group of students, or maybe they want one course for this group of students and that course for another group of students. So yes, you would just email us. It's no cost as long as you work at a New Jersey public school or a charter school that has some amount of public funding. We're not allowed to let private schools or independent schools do this. And we're not allowed to have teachers who live in New Jersey but work at out-of-state schools. Unfortunately, that's the one limitation we have because of the funding sources. I'm still working on trying to, expand this in the future to let, especially people in the greater region who, whether they live in New Jersey or not, may work at schools in Philadelphia or up in New York State or even Connecticut, where we've had some interest before.
Elizabeth, I hope that answered your question. That was your question.
Does that answer? Because there's no way to just sign up on Canvas, or sign up at Rutgers. You would email our team. We would create an account for you with the help of the Rutgers Canvas staff, and then you'd be able to do the course at your own pace. No cost.
So we had another question here that asked, I'm curious if you surveyed the level of anxiety any of the participants were experiencing due to climate change.
Yeah, I'm seeing that in the chat. And Ann Price, really good question. We did not take quite. I don't remember if the Student Conservation Association had questions about anxiety. I'll go back to that slide just so you can So there wasn't a specific question that asked about anxiety. We have other aspects of our program that are trying to look at anxiety and depression and some other symptoms among teachers during COVID-19 that we have IRB approval for. We did not have IRB approval for or good validated questions at the time we did this to ask about that, but I think it's a good question and it's something we'd want to look at in the future. So with the exception of these questions that have been, essentially tested on a fairly large national sample of similarly aged young people, unfortunately, we did not have any data about anxiety or depression related to climate change, but it's certainly it should be done in the future for sure. And we acknowledge in our paper that future research needs to go into some of these other issues as well as be, done more broadly outside of a state that has learning standards now. Really good question.
So there was a couple more questions related to access. One person asked if they don't work in a school district, they work for a nonprofit organization who has high school internship program. Could they get access to the course? And then the related question is, what would the options for private school teachers be?
Okay, is the first question you noted from Maya Mitchell? I think that's that one's showing up in the chat box. Is that was the first one?
Yep.
So Maya, thank you for the question. The answer is yes. So if I understand correctly, if you're a nonprofit organization with a high school internship program and you're serving New Jersey schools, and I'm assuming if you're here as an ANJEE member like me, you're based in New Jersey or you're doing a lot of things with New Jersey, I believe the answer is yes, especially if you're, if I'm reading correctly here, your program's under the umbrella of Rutgers Cooperative Extension, so you're working with Janice McDowell and others at 4-H. So I think the answer is yes. Definitely send our team account an email. I'll go back to that. You can certainly copy me, and I'll be aware that you asked me this. I think the answer is definitely yes, especially if you've already done stuff with Janice and her folks at the Cooperative Extension. Now, the second question was about private schools. I would definitely be interested in letting you preview the course as a teacher. Again, I'm looking for more ways to fund broader accessibility to this. So I would say, please contact us or contact me directly, and we can definitely try to get you a preview of the course. We do have teachers in private schools for disabled students who are getting their endorsements for career and technical ed that do take our trainings and have access to things. So if you're an independent school, then we could probably talk about having you preview it and then maybe figure out a way to find some means of having a group of students do it. And there are ways, it just has to be more of a case-by-case basis. But for certain, I think to preview it, that would not be a problem. I've done things with Mike Shawdraw from the past where we've piloted something with the school he worked with and then went for a proposal to make it broader. So yeah, feel free to reach out for me or to me, and then we'll work something out so at least you can preview it if you're currently at a private school, and then go from there. I don't see anything else in the chat. I know that some people are probably writing you directly.
Yeah, I don't have anything else in the chat either. If there's anyone who has a longer, more involved question, you can certainly unmute yourself and ask it. I saw one just come through from Pearl. Pearl, if you just want to ask that question, you can unmute.
I can read it as well, but if she would like to ask it or expand on it, that's okay as well. All right, Kelly, I'll try to answer, and then if she wants to follow up. So I think this is Pearl T from ISLES, which I know is a nonprofit organization that colleagues of mine at Rutgers have done work with in the past. So the question is about how's the information been structured to inform of their greater impact? So Pearl, if I understand the question correctly, we cover both urban, suburban, rural, and frontier or really rural information in the course. And we point people to resources that go into more detail from the different state and federal agencies. We also covered the idea of urban heat island. So, I was definitely, as someone who's an air quality researcher, I definitely, and also someone who's done work on lead, I definitely made sure that there were some specific details that were more relevant to urban and suburban New Jersey in this course. We actually had a proposal with my colleague Ji Gong to expand this course through an NSF mechanism to incorporate his mapping of urban flooding. And unfortunately, we weren't funded on the first try. We're going to try again at some point. But there's a basic level of information that covers all the different urban, suburban, and rural. And you are absolutely right. In the future, we'd like to expand this with other modules that would include risks of urban flooding from severe storms. Another area that we were interested in doing was, the idea of hotspots with respect to air quality, as well as high temperature and humidity combined for heat index. Those are just some examples of one proposal we've submitted that couldn't get funded because it was a very competitive competition, but that we're interested in doing more about. And when I say do more, it's not just giving information. We had some project-based learning ideas that we want to connect into the course, especially the use of mapping, or having students do what we used to call in Georgia photo voice, which I think is still a term people are familiar with.
Hello, Kelly.
Kelly, I can unshare screen so I can help see who's asking the question. Maybe I'll do that. Hold on. Okay.
If I could ask 2 questions, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Great. So I'd like to ask 2 questions. So one is, do you think that working through students in their public school environment, say, is the most effective way to reach their families in terms of decision making that happens in the household? That's I guess my first question.
So I can give you an initial opinion. I think if I understand the question correctly, I think we take the approach where we're trying to better train teachers, administrators, and students on safety and health, and in this case climate change. So again, if we're trying to improve individual level information, I do believe that tends to bring information home, and therefore hopefully can assist families and their immediate communities potentially making better decisions. But if you're asking me if we have data on that, what were their longer term experiences with doing that in their communities, the answer is no. But I think from our other work where we've documented that over 2 decades, we have reduced injury rates in New Jersey by having better education and training and better ways for teachers and administrators to go do their once every 10-day site visits for work-based learning. That's well documented. So I think that I don't have hard data to share with you to make my comment, but I would tend towards saying it's certainly feasible to believe that's possible, but it's also not the only way. I think there are many other talented educators working in climate change, or people doing applied research like me that are trying to, get involved and do what we can to assist teachers who have to, cover learning standards every day. The way I discuss it with my colleagues throughout Rutgers, this is an all hands on deck issue when it comes to climate change. It's broader than any one discipline can address. It's very different from some of the other science or public health things that we've been working on at times over the course of our careers. And I'm only midway through my career, and I who knows what's going to happen in 10 years. But yeah, I think the answer is yes, but there's going to have to be a multiple approach, multi-pronged effort. And this is just one way to contribute to addressing this. But it's certainly not the best, and it's certainly and definitely not the only way it has to happen.
Thanks. And if I could ask just one more question. So I think a lot of people in the environmental movement got almost blindsided by the billions of dollars that suddenly are available for infrastructure of all kinds. And, I'm wondering, how do you factor that into talking to kids about, career and climate change?
Really good question. Like you said, I don't know for sure. I do know, what I'm aware of is that there's definitely a move toward certain career clusters and certain industries that have students feeding into those career clusters to become more aware of the connections between, climate change in this industry or climate change in that industry, because if they're going to be entering that space with their jobs, you should be aware of direct and indirect consequences. So I do believe that teachers, in my opinion, I'm doing it myself, with my own graduate students on other areas of public health and environmental science, we can definitely help make people aware. But I personally, I think it's going to take time to see where that money ends up. I don't think any of us really know exactly how all of that's going to be distributed. And I have the opportunity to have insight being on one of these EPA advisory committees. And so they're just getting their budget for any intramural research, let alone what they can offer grants for. So I think it's just too early to know for sure, but definitely through the New Jersey Talent Network and some of these clusters where there's clearly going to be opportunity for more jobs to be created because of the wind industry or certain other industries they're going to need to add to that renewable energy portfolio. I know those teachers are trying to add in more information about how their industry connects directly and indirectly to climate change. But with respect to the Inflation Reduction Act, I don't know, and I don't have direct insight. I don't know who does yet. So I don't know if that's a good enough answer for you. That's the best I can do thinking about it right now.
Thanks.
Well, thank you everyone for your questions. It sounds like we could probably chat for another 45 minutes, but we've reached the end of our time. So thank you, Derek, as well for your presentation today. We have some great chatting about this. So just a few reminders before we close out the session. I'm going to go ahead right now and put the YouTube link in the chat if you all want to grab that. We also have an evaluation if you want to do that right, after the session. I'm putting that in the chat right now as well, although you will get our evaluation link emailed out to you as well. Just a reminder, today is the last day to sign up for field experiences. So if you have not done so and you think the weather is going to hold out and you want to try one of those, there are spaces. You can add that on to an existing registration. Just thank you again to our sponsors, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and our anonymous donor, and the Institute for Natural History Arts. So thank you very much, Derek. This was a great presentation, and if you want to send out any resources, I'll make sure that all of our attendees get them as well.
Thank you for the compliment. I just put in the chat my email and the team email, so that's probably the best way to follow up with us as noted, and that includes free reprints of any of the papers or a preview of the course if you're a teacher in New Jersey or the nonprofit working with the high school students.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
I can't give you the PowerPoint though, because I'm using it for New Jersey environmental health and national environmental health. So
that's okay.
Once that's done, then, but given the papers are out in public, that basically includes all the information anyway.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you, everyone. Hope to see you in future sessions.
Thank you all. And I will see Kelly. I'll be in that session at 5. Looking forward to the next. I think that's the next presentation. So thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Have a great day.
I'm just waiting to see if anyone else writes in the chat. I did ask Miss Pearl if that was enough for her question. She's spot on. That's exactly what we proposed, but very few people. I think it was like